Honestly, what we want people to hear is that trust can be rebuilt here.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about the terms betrayal, we will automatically go to more of like what I deal with. I worked with drug, sex, porn addict, and then I also predominantly worked with the betrayed partners. You know, I always say betrayed partners, one of the biggest tragedies or casualties of the deception and lying is that they were denied all the information they needed to make the next best choice for themselves.
You hit it, Kristin, when you said that so many times there's just these blanket black and white answers to these kinds of situations. And I think it gives people a false sense of whatever their reality might be, when there is a continuum where things can end up with a healthy rhythm. It does require us to dig deep and work through all those parts and hold the truth of the present and have the ability to look at the past and how that's influenced it. But there is hope for that.
Yeah. All right, James and Teri Kraft here with Marriage Health, and we are so excited because you know what, we're going to talk about rebuilding trust today.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I know that's a big issue for a lot of people, but we're not going to do that alone.
No, because we want to know, is healing really possible? And so we want to actually ask the expert.
So we got an expert. So we went into the database and we went and found the best of the best. And this person is dear to our hearts, but a good friend. But probably I say one of the best in the field in this area. So, and you have to, this is Kristin Snowden's going to be joining us today, but not just introducing Kristin, and we'll do that in a second, but you got to go to her podcast as well. There is a ton of information that you can check up, and she'll tell us a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she has an incredible resource that you got to tap into, especially when it talks going around trauma, and building trust is a major focus of what she focuses on as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so it'll be a great opportunity to tap into that resource for you.
Absolutely.
To join in. So.
Yes. Well, so Kristin, we're going to, we've kind of slightly introduced you. We've had you on our podcast before. We've collaborated with you in many different ways. And, you know, you are dear to us, just a dear friend, dear person in our life. But what we would love for our listeners to hear from you is maybe a little bit about, what you do, what brought you to this place, and, what you're passionate about as we dive into this subject of rebuilding trust after relationship rupture or betrayal. Mm-hmm. Is healing really possible? So,
well, welcome, Kristin.
Yeah.
Can you handle that? That's a big one. We just threw a big one at you.
I'm ready. No, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be back again, speaking to you both. In all forms of media, it's always a pleasure. But my name is Kristin Snowden, and just to give you all a little background, I started this journey about 15 to 17 years ago when I started running a men's drug and sex addiction program. And so I would say from those years working in that environment and that residential treatment program, I feel like I got to see the most extreme ways that we really muck up relationships. We really mess up sex, love, intimacy, really hurt ourselves and others in the process. And so I've always said from then on, I could kind of work backward and understand in the more run-of-the-mill couples issues, how we rupture trust, how we betray, and the path towards healing and transcending that traumatic experience, which we've now found experiencing betrayal at the hands of trusted loved ones, with our primary attachment partners, is indeed recorded in our body as traumatic. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Well, and I think that a lot of people think that, the trauma that comes, at us when we feel that betrayal is like in very small certain categories. And I know, of course, we talk about, intimate betrayal, when it's an intimate partner. But I think it'd be good for us to cover today even some ways that happens, maybe in ways that we might not think either. Maybe it's other ways, and maybe you can help us kind of dive into that as well. Because I think that we as humans feel it more often than we might be able to actually say. And in order to really kind of heal something, we really kind of have to dive into it and walk with, trusted people to help us, through that healing process. But if I'm going like, it feels like betrayal, but I don't know if it is, I think it's really good for us to cover that so that people know what is betrayal trauma, right? Yeah. And so what is the gamut of that? Can you help our listeners kind of feel like, okay, hey, how do I fit into this category, and what does that look like?
Right. There is an extreme spectrum in how your body records trauma, or how extreme something is going to be recorded into your body. So we could have a whole separate discussion on that, about what is trauma and what exactly gets recorded into your body as traumatic. The most simplest way to explain that is your body has a heightened experience anytime something is outside the realm of consistent and predictable. So anytime something goes out of the level of certainty, and I know what's going to come from this, and I know what to predict from this, I'll have a heightened experience. And the more levels of uncertainty, powerlessness, loss of control, loss of choice in the matter, disconnection from my own body or from others during that particular experience, that will gauge how much I record trauma in my body. One of my colleagues said, a car accident on the freeway is going to be recorded by just a regular person in a different way than, let's say, someone who's a race car driver, because they have a different history, experience, they have a different realm of what they think is controllable. So all of those elements are dependent on the person, the life history, and what exactly happens. But I think when we talk about the terms betrayal, we will automatically go to more of like what I deal with, which is, again, I worked with drug, sex, porn addicts, love addicts. Those are various names. They all fall under the umbrella of intimacy disorders. And then I also predominantly worked with the betrayed partners of those who loved and trusted these partners, and then uncovered years of nefarious double life living in the background that they had no idea about. So when we think betrayal in terms of primary attachments, primary relationships, husband and wife, then we think of infidelity, having affairs, porn use, unknown porn use, spending money that your partner's unaware of. For my sex, love, porn addicts, it would be nefarious behaviors online, paid sex, massage parlors. But yeah, to go back to what you were saying, Teri, if I brought it to more of like the run-of-the-mill couples issues outside of affairs, betrayal can be experienced or noted in our body anytime we feel like our partner is not who we thought he or she was. Right? If they respond in a certain way. So let's say I just lost someone in my family, and I'm sad and I'm hurt, and I need someone to validate, hey, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be hurt. I'm going to sit with you. And instead, my partner just kind of comes home and what I would say is gaslight you, deny my reality and my experience, which I'm grieving and I'm sad, and come home and say, hey, you weren't really that close to your mom or your dad. Why are you really that sad? How long are you going to be sad? This is unreasonable. There's no affair there. There's no hidden secret double life. But I'll still record that as, you were supposed to be my partner. You were supposed to be the person that could sit with me through my good, bad, light, dark, and see me and know me, and be, as Dan Siegel calls it, attuned to my needs. And help me, right? We seek out our close, trusted loved ones. When we want to celebrate, we seek them out to be upregulated and enjoy it even more. And then we seek people out when we're dysregulated or sad to hear compassion and empathy, and you're going to get through this. So that is the giant spectrum from infidelity and sexual acting out and double life living and money spending to the very more simple and common experiences, which I seek out who I believe is my teammate, who is supposed to have my best interest in mind. We're supposed to be moving along life as two people who care about each other and want to be there for the other and help the other feel safe. And then I do something that makes that person feel like I'm not that person to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, when you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with betrayal and that trauma, you don't sign up for it. When you get to the altar of your wedding, you're there to make that vow for life. You're not signing up, not knowing. And a lot of times what happens, that comes into the marriage and you don't even know some of these behaviors are already there. And so all of a sudden you're going into, some people go into this marriage like, hey, I'm really excited about moving forward. And you don't know the story behind the story that you see because there's deception that's been controlling their environment for so long, the one who's struggling with betrayal, and it's amazing the trauma that caused a person on the receiving end of that because they're blindsided. They're like, wait a second, I didn't see this. I thought we're going to live happily ever after, but all of a sudden they come to a realization of like, my world has got flipped upside down. I thought we had something different going on here.
Right.
And then they get flipped upside down and then they don't know which way's up. No wonder why they have trauma in their lives. I know that's what we kind of had to experience ourselves in our own story. And so it's important for people to realize, I know, and we have a lot of empathy for people who honestly didn't sign up for that mess. Didn't sign up to go through all that junk. And then all of a sudden they're on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
And I know you deal with a lot of people, especially a lot of women too, that are working through that. What have you seen with people like that who just didn't sign up for it and they were blindsided by this because it is a reality?
One thing I've seen, and I think that our field has fallen short in, is really acknowledging what I call the very unique scars of betrayal trauma. I just did a YouTube video on how gaslighting, living in an environment where your partner, the acting out, betraying partner, the one who has the secret life, maybe they have a secret affair, substance use issue, or they're spending secret money, they are highly invested in keeping you off the scent. So they are regularly telling you, no, ignore those blocked phone calls or those late nights or my strange behavior or my erratic emotions. You're not accurately picking up on something's off and something's wrong with your primary connection. No, instead, you're crazy. If you would spend more time meeting my needs or keeping this house clean or taking care of the kids or making money, then we wouldn't be having these marital issues. So just pay no attention to the stuff I have going on in the background, or as Omar Minwalia says, my secret sexual basement that I'm keeping hidden from everybody. So in a marital situation where that's existent, that person is working very hard on gaslighting you and deceiving you and keeping you in a place of honest paralysis and confusion. And one of the unique scars of that is that we realize now, as clinicians and people who study trauma, how much our primary partner is a filter in which we put a lot of our reality through. Right? So you check in even from like, hey, did you like that movie or did you not like that movie? Hey, what do you think of my new friend or my new job? You check in with your immediate community around you to say, am I assessing things accurately? But the problem is when your betraying partner is actively lying and deceiving, it really mucks up the wiring in your brain to be able to figure out what is right, what is wrong. Am I crazy? Am I picking up, red flags? And it really throws betrayed partners off. So I get really upset sometimes when I see people call in to therapists trying to get advice and their response is like, well, what's wrong with you? This person's dangerous, just leave them. And I kind of want to scream out to the TV, like, what do you mean? They've been living with someone who's been actively lying and deceiving and gaslighting them. They might not even trust that it's Tuesday when the calendar says that it's Tuesday, because that's how much being lied to by your trusted primary partner messes up your ability to assess Is it daylight outside? What is the date and month? And it really screws up a betrayed partner's ability to connect with his or her instincts and keep him or her safe, and figuring out the next best step after uncovering these behaviors. I mean, that's one of many unique scars that I see of betrayed partners. I mean, there's other things that are like the carried shame, right? So if I'm living with someone unknowingly where he or she's been acting out and living in secrets and subterfuge, and they have so much shame, I don't know about it, but I'm definitely picking up on just the fact that they're like, if anybody really knew me, they would not like me. And there's they look at the world from a more cynical way. They make more cynical comments. They, don't have role models. They question your choices. They think everybody else is a liar and a cynic. And you kind of absorb their carried shame from living with someone who's been living a double life versus someone who's living like aligned and authentic and actually has a sense of, I'm a good person. There's a cost to that. There's betrayed partners who don't really know something's wrong with their sex life because they don't have another source or reference point, but they'll have major body image issues. They'll think something's wrong with them sexually for wanting it, or for wanting it in a different way, or feeling unsafe with their partner around it. The other parts are related to, the grief and loss when they uncover what their partner's been doing. They'll talk about seeing memories in their photos pop up of a birthday party or a trip, and then they'll find out subsequently that their partner's been acting out and lying that whole time, and they just question, was any of this real? Were they ever really present? And then they'll find too, because the way your survival mechanism works is if you find out that your partner is a liar, deceiver, not who you thought they were going to be, your survival system is very generalized. So it will suddenly send out the message to you that all people are unsafe and all people are untrustworthy. And so then in the moment where you need the most help and you need the most support because you've been betrayed and found out you can't trust your primary partner, your instincts will say, well, trust no one. Maybe everybody's lying. Maybe everybody's living a double life. And maybe I'm the only sucker that follows the laws and tries to be a good person. And so, I could go on and on and on, but there are so many costs and consequences, physical costs, mental and emotional costs to uncovering levels of betrayal in your primary relationship that I always say, like, therapists and helping clinicians really need to know this stuff, because if not, they can misdiagnose the betrayed partner, the acting out partner, and really screw up the healing process.
Would you say that we're looking at a large population, a percentage of the population that is, dealing with these kinds of, like, the continuum of, because we know that there is a continuum here. Like you said, there's, sort of like the smaller ruptures that feel like betrayal, and all the way up to, the infidelity and, these ongoing abuses. I mean, what do you think? I know you can't give a perfect percentage, but is it a pretty wide swath of people that we're dealing with? I'm so biased because that's what I do for a living. So I see, hundreds, if not thousands of clients per year who suffer from this very, devastating, life-altering experience. But I'm also the person that people seek out when they've uncovered these nightmare scenarios. I definitely want to say it happens more than the general public realizes. When people ask me when I'm not wearing my therapist hat, like what I do for a living, and they act all shocked, like, what? No. And then you just realize when people start sharing their stories, or when I even will share some of, like, my personal experience, obviously not identifying names or anything like that, people say, oh yeah, my aunt had that happen, or a cousin had that happen.
it happens more than you think. It's just obviously it's so taboo in our family or in our culture. Similar to like, I'm gonna be tangential and say the messed up way we don't really support people when they lose people in their lives. There's another angel in heaven now, and God meant for your loved one to die prematurely. We say these anecdotal things that really shortchange the person in their hurt and pain and struggle. And so I think people don't want to share these stories of deep betrayal, of deep hurt, because a lot of people fall short in their ability to support that person. Kind of just say, oh, that sounds terrible. You should get away from that psycho, things like that.
Well, it's important too. It's not just the betrayed partner. I mean, you think about go on and down the line to your kids, and they're part of that. They're betrayed as well. They have a parent that has got an impact that has, then they grow up and it's never resolved. Parents separate, they go their own way. And then a kid's recipient of this trauma that's never been dealt with. What happens? They take that into their adulthood, into their future relationships. So it's important for us to understand, what do you think the main thing with betrayal and the impact of that the trauma that comes with that is the core issue is safety. It kind of compromises the safety within a person's life. Do you think that's the core issue that we face with people who are on the receiving end of that?
I put it a little bit different. Yes, I've found almost everything comes down to two things, which is your survival system in your body, your autonomic nervous system of what's dangerous and what's not, what's dangerous and how do I protect myself. But then the other part is like a shame social cue of who do I need to be and what do I need to be in order to keep myself safe. And so I think it's usually comes down to those two big issues. Like I always say, one of the most effective interventions for betrayal trauma healing is like parts work, internal family systems, Dick Schwartz stuff. You also hear it in like wounded child work. But what I essentially use it as is this idea that there's so much cognitive dissonance that occurs that splits your brain into two, where the person that loves you the most has hurt you the most. And as I described with all that gaslighting and deception, now I've lost my gauge of listening to my gut and figuring out what's unsafe and what I need to run from and run to, who's a safe person. So yes, there's all that safety stuff that you're talking about, James, but it's also this idea that I need to get in touch with all my parts inside of me, right? My performative part, my part that wants to be a great mom, a part that's grieving my marriage of what I thought it was going to be and what it's not anymore. The part of me that doesn't want to be emotional and just wants to do and read the self-help books and check everything off the box and, get through this. And then the part that just wants to get in a little ball and cry and not trust anyone ever again. So I feel like a lot of the healing in the process of getting to safety is getting in touch with all those parts internally. So as I describe this, so I can eventually stand up as CEO of, Kristin Snowden. And this is our mission statement. And I know you're all my employees, you're all part of this process and the mission, but I'm going to lead the ship to safety. So it's kind of, and that's coming to terms with the cognitive dissonance of everything, that it can be both this and this. And I'm still going to figure out, that I know I have the resources to figure out the best next step, to hear you when you're in pain, and you being, my hurt parts, my performative parts, my scared parts, and all of that kind of stuff is what I feel like are really great tools to move you towards feeling like you can be safe, not necessarily because your partner is ever going to be safe again, more to be revealed on that, but that I have the skills to be present and to assess the situation and to figure out the next best steps to keep me and my loved ones safe.
That's so good. That's so good. Because I, as what you're saying is so true. It's like I know that if I get to that point, that, my miracle, my healing, my ability to show up in the world healed or healing, I guess, is assured even if my partner, doesn't want to do that work. But we hope that they would, right? So I guess the question of the day is, can trust be rebuilt? Can trust be rebuilt? And what does that look like, in your opinion, your experience in walking with individuals and couples?
Yes, and I think it's to reference what I just said, which is, and what you're saying too, which is you can never control another flawed human being. You can't control his or her choices. Will he ever be honest again? Will she ever get recovery? Will this ever happen to me again? Will I ever be bamboozled and lied to again? You can't control that part. So that part will always be that uncertainty, right? That vulnerability that Brené Brown talks about, to engage life and to engage in your hopes and dreams and connections with others, being uncertain of the final result, right? It's the risk of life. It's where the most meaningful things happen and the most painful, devastating things happen. But I feel like you can bolster it up when you do a lot of internal work. You try to heal the visceral traumatic wiring that's in your body. You try to understand all the hurt parts, all the fearful parts. You try to bolster up your community, your external community, right? You need to find this, work through this cognitive dissonance of, or again, as Richard Rohr would say, this non-dualism of my primary partner lied to me and is a liar and maybe not someone to trust today. But these betrayed partners that I've been in community with are people that I can share my story with. They've heard my story with empathy and compassion. And so for now, I'm going to trust them. I'm going to help them, check in with my reality, check in with my boundary setting, check in with, is this a good consequence structure for holding boundaries with my partner? And we just kind of slowly start navigating it through those different areas, bolstering up my trauma wiring, my shame stories, getting in touch with my internal parts, seeing if I can re-establish my state of being CEO of Kristin Snowden and moving towards mission statement, but then also bolstering up my external resourcing. If I have a spiritual practice, my community of people who maybe suffered and struggled in a similar way. So I know more likely than not, they're going to be able to respond with empathy and compassion and non-judgment to my struggles. Go through disclosures with my partner, should he or she prove he or she's ready to do that. See if that person is willing to do the work to figure out why he or she did what he or she did. They have a full narrative understanding of what led them to those behaviors, what triggers them, and the replacement behaviors that they're going to do instead of those behaviors that are outside their integrity, outside their value systems. And then also their own external communities of accountability partners that are going to check in with them and make sure that they make the next right decision to stay in alignment with who they are. And then me as the betrayed partner, watch this recovery process and decide if that's someone that I can trust again, or at least, want to engage with to see if they can be a better person now that they know better and are doing better. And I'll always add, that's what I like using James for, because I think he always does a really good job of helping the acting out, betraying partner with just new decision making. As I always say, their best thinking got them there. So to think that they can heal it and get back or become a new, different person without the help of external people, external accountability, external kind of checking in is this the right decision, and develop empathy and compassion where I previously was really struggling with it. You need that outside source. You can't do it alone.
You have sent me some really high-powered CEOs and executives that in their world, they have been in control. They have built a strong company, a community in the workforce, but in their private life, they have been completely out of control and decimated those that are closest to them. And so there's a challenge there, because they have a hard time switching gears, because they think, how can I be so successful in one area and have no control in another area? And they have a hard time connecting the two, and they just see it as, well, can we just move on to the future and let's start over? And talk is cheap. Yeah. Yeah, but that doesn't work, and I know many people who have said that. I just want to move on. Give me another chance. I'll move on and I'll change, but that doesn't bring any healing to the person who says, hey, you betrayed, you broke my heart, and you stomped on it and shattered it. I'd like to see you go back and find out what actually caused it in the first place, so that we don't repeat this again, because if I'm going to stick around, I can't repeat this again. So what would you say? This is a great question for you. What would you say to that person that's sitting in front of you, Kristin, that would say, my husband, I'll just say that scenario, husband and a wife, my husband is saying he just wants to move on and he doesn't want to have to deal with this. He would rather just work on our marriage now, build on something and rebuild a new marriage out of this. But I don't want to deal with the past. Let's just leave the past and let's move on to the future. Is that building trust with somebody? I know the answer, but I would love to hear from you.
That's such a common question, right? So it's first like, oh, he admitted to everything, and now he just is like, okay, he'll do couples counseling, but like, let's not talk about the past or what he did. Let's just move on to like, talk about how they communicate and, are they having sex or not, or things like that. So my response to that always is like, we can own two separate things all at the same time. I know our brain doesn't like that, but we're going to push it to do this. And it's going to be in the lifetime or lifespan of a marriage, we screw up. We're imperfect people. So we could blow it on both sides with communication, connection, repair, all that, right? That has nothing to do and is completely separate from the fact that we're going to stick with the husband scenario. Your husband chose to lie, sneak around, live a double life outside his marriage, go against his commitments, promises, values, and then gaslight you and deceive you and compartmentalize and tell himself stories that he was entitled to do it, or whatever she doesn't know isn't going to hurt her, or I give her a great life, so what is she really going to complain about? Those are two separate coexisting realities. And so we cannot go to couples therapy and just talk about the one marital stuff that maybe in the lifespan of our relationship, we struggled and screwed up. There is a whole section where he had choices and options for coping skills, how to handle something that was stressful or hurtful or painful, or his, difficult childhood, or the fact that, no one ever taught him what his emotions were. And he still decided to lie, cheat, sneak around, and do these acting out behaviors, despite how much he expressed loving his family and wanting to be a good person, or if there's religion, be aligned with religious values. Those both have to be talked about.
Right.
That's right.
It's a total comprehensive process.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of people feel overwhelmed by that. Let's be honest, right? Because why we're running from those, we're running from those pains and wounds from the past. That's why we have those coping, mechanisms in the first place. So how do you deal with that then if one of the partners is kind of like, I'm overwhelmed by looking at both of these at the same time? Do you take it apart, or do you kind of like gently?
I can work with that, because what you're expressing is someone who's in touch with how overwhelmed they are and are expressing it, right? The three of us know that is not how it shows up. It shows up in high defensiveness. You don't know what you're talking about. If she just had sex with me more, this wouldn't have happened. right? Lots of rationalization, justification, just give me the 6 things to do and I'll check them off the box. But really, none of these things are what we call as our soul changes, right? None of them are things where we have these come to Jesus's where it's like, ugh, what I did was terrible. And I had so many mini MINI moments to change the behavior, to do better, to ask for help, to own the lies. And I just said, screw it, I don't wanna. And so to me, this is where being like really skilled or experienced in this type of client or in this type of field is you learn very masterfully how to gently challenge their distorted thinking in that way, right? Point out their multiple levels of defensiveness. Explain to them and the betrayed partner. Sometimes you have to also turn to the higher functioning person in the room, right? The more emotionally intelligent person in the room, which is usually the betrayed partner, and say, hey, before you were in this marriage and in this situation because he was highly invested in you not knowing anything, right? Like a masterful liar, deception, gaslighting, you name it. But now you know, for the most part, what he's been doing. And so you now have been given most, hopefully, of the information you need to make the next best decision for you and, let's say, your children or your health or well-being or whatever. And so there's a lot of knowing what you know now, and the fact that your partner doesn't want to talk about why he or she did what he did, have a full comprehensive understanding of what led to that in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and figure out replacement behaviors and replacement structures that need to go in its place to stop it from happening again. Knowing all that information now, because you're seeing it in couples therapy, or getting the feedback from his individual therapist, how do you want to move forward? I always say betrayed partners, one of the biggest tragedies or casualties of the deception and lying is that they were denied all the information they needed to make the next best choice for themselves. And so I will point out that now that you have it, what are you going to do about it?
Right. That's good. Which gives them autonomy, and it gives them a sense of, healthy power. There's been a power differential. So now we've got, the ability to make an informed decision in health in our relationship, which is so powerful. We want huge. That. And honestly, what we want people to hear is that trust can be rebuilt here. Yeah. And I think that sometimes, if you turn on the, every single social media platform, if you start scrolling, of course, the algorithm will start just spitting out, videos. And you hit it, Kristin, when you said that so many times there's just these blanket black and white answers to these kinds of situations. And I think it gives people a false sense of whatever their reality might be, when there is a continuum where things can end up with a healthy rhythm. There is a process. Mm-hmm. There is a process, and it, of course, takes willingness on both ends. It does require us to dig deep and work through all those parts and hold the truth of the present and have the ability to look at the past and how that's influenced it. But there is hope for that.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that isn't, I think with people like you and us and, some other people, I think we say that. And it's funny because I think the people who actually work with people know that there is a way. Sometimes there isn't, but there is a way. And I think, those of us who are actually in the trenches with people, we're the ones that people should maybe be listening to more than just people who are like, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel, so I'm just going to start saying things, and it's like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. people like you, people like us, we're sitting in the trenches every single day for decades working with people. And it's like, we can help you. There is a continuum of experience and results, but we're not going to lie to you and say that it's not, that it's hard, but trust can be rebuilt.
Yeah.
That there is a system and there is a process, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
But is there an ability? Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what would you say? Yeah. No, what would you say to that?
Yeah, so I was going to say that the most common question I get, right, in all my YouTubes and webinars and all that is like, how, after knowing what I've known and, uncovered, let's stick with the husband, gender scenario, and finding out what my husband did behind my back while saying that he loved me, while going on family trips, while celebrating anniversaries, how on earth could I possibly trust this person again? I will say, well, every human is unique. Generally, me, Teri, James, we've all been doing this, as you said, for like decades now. From the hundreds or thousands of clients we've had, it tends to look like I, betrayed partner, have uncovered this devastating set of information. I may not even know all of it, but we tend to immediately want to go into couples therapy. That can or cannot be good. It depends on, I always really think it's best for someone to go to someone who has kind of been in the ER version of couples therapy, doing the most acute, extreme versions of it. So again, I kind of always joke, if I can handle like sex, love, porn addiction, relationship rupture, I feel like I'm pretty confident in being able to work with someone's more run-of-the-mill common couples issues that pop up. But that's just me. I'm biased in believing that. But so usually it looks like, a couple going in so that they can get education, guidance, like kind of crisis, this is what's going on. A professional in this field usually needs to assess the betrayer, the acting out person, to find out, is this more aligned with like an addiction issue? And again, I have YouTube videos on that, like what's infidelity and more run-of-the-mill betrayal versus a chronic acting out pattern that looks more like addiction. Because that kind of recovery healing pattern is very different. Similar overlap, but still some different extra behaviors and choices and boundaries. The acting out partner, the betrayer, needs to go with someone who's suffered and struggled or an expert in that field to figure out, gosh, why did I, despite having these commitments and promises in this life, and maybe even theoretically loving my partner, why did I choose to do these behaviors over and over again? And then what was triggering it? What was on the outside? When I was seeking pleasure and running from pain, what was going on? What was cut off? What was I minimizing? What kind of stories and entitlements and rationalizations did I tell myself to kind of wrap myself in a blanket of, this is fine, it's not a big deal? And that is super uncomfortable, because we kind of have to jump in a shame swamp of like, wow, I'm capable of really doing harmful, painful, destructive acts that are just so hypocritical and so counter to the person I try to project to other people, and gross. That feels gross. And it's also really scary, because there's always been this hidden story for betrayers. If you really knew me, if you really saw this double life that I'd be living, you wouldn't love me anymore. So it's usually very frightening for the betrayer, addict, liar, cheater, whatever you want to call them, because now they're living in real time what one of their biggest shame stories is, oh crap, you now know. What are you going to do? And then in the same time, the betrayed partner, as I explained at the beginning of this discussion, is so traumatized and so turned upside down from all the years of deception and gaslighting and just, again, this fear of ever making themselves vulnerable to another human. I am a huge believer in group work for both the acting out partner and the betrayed partner, because the symptom is that there's a fear of vulnerability, the mutual symptom. I never want to expose myself to the madness of humans, because I have so much evidence that they're terrible and I don't want to expose myself to them. But as we know from our wiring, that's not going to usually be a successful strategy. We have to have boundaries and be able to assess for danger, but we still need humans to experience love, connection, camaraderie, companionship, things like that. So I really encourage betrayed partners to go to betrayed partners groups of people who've suffered and struggled in a similar way. I think the acting out partner, if they're addicts, go to their respective 12-step meetings, men's groups, etc. And then also they could be working with individual therapists as well, dealing with trauma work to really take out the visceral traumatic wiring. There are interventions that manage that: EMDR, internal family systems, neurofeedback, somatic experiencing, EFT, things like that. And then just really like get back in touch with their feelings, their instincts, their intuition, communication, how do they want to handle, healthy coping, and accountability for both sides, honestly. Even though the betrayed partner isn't the one who had the lying, sneaking around problem, they're in deep fear. They're in deep trauma. They're going to need other betrayed partners or therapists to say, wow, my partner keeps relapsing, or I keep catching him or her lying. The next time I catch him to lie, I'm going to ask them to leave. But then their level of fear of, or just honestly, sometimes they're in so much chaos that they just sometimes just want to live in like a tempered level of chaos. Like that's just enough for them. They just don't want to deal with like divorcing and moving out and finding attorneys. I mean, that's all a whole other world that they just don't even have like the mental, emotional capacity for. And by the way, I'm not diagnosing them and saying there's anything wrong. It's completely understandable. They're in complete trauma. So we could understand why they don't want to add fuel to a fire that's been burning already. But being in a group setting and with a therapist who can help support them, they can kind of continue to keep that at the front of their thought process and continue to assess, am I doing everything I need to do to keep myself safe? Is there anything else I can do in both worlds? And then the ones who make it, in my opinion, from what I've observed, it's for the addict, acting out partner. They usually, what starts as James said, like, okay, just give me my 5 things, tell me what to do so we can move forward. Like, I don't want to talk about the past, but sure, I feel bad. I want to like not do that anymore. Are the ones who eventually shift that into soul change, where they let the pain of what they've done to their partner and what they've done to themselves and their lives and stuff, they really just truly want to clean it up and be better and do better. They learn how to lean into their men's groups to talk about their feelings and figure out what the next best choice is. Do some work about why they did what they did and have a better understanding for it. Can convey that to their partner. Can connect really to empathy and compassion to understand what they've done to their partner and sit with it. They develop a higher tolerance for uncomfortable feelings and uncomfortable conversations so they can sit there in that space with their betrayed partner. And it's usually the betrayed partner, when they see this different person show up, I kind of say it's you're not really ever falling in love with or trusting that other person anymore. You would never trust that other person. But this new person might be displaying a different way of handling things, a different way of communicating, a different way of coping. And that new person that shows up from all the changes that he's done might be someone you could start trusting or being at least willing to try vulnerability with a little bit more.
Yeah, so creating that space is important for couples. Now, I remember when Teri and I, everything, the bottom fell out in our lives, you looked at me and you said, I'll give you a year. And that boundary for me was really healthy. I'm like, a year? Okay, I'll take it. I don't deserve it, but I'll take that year. And I remember that year was really important. It wasn't words. You didn't need any words from me. It wasn't like, I'm sorry I didn't do it for you. It was really an action that shifted in a gear that made the difference for you, and I think that's where people come to us, Kristin, because we walk through it. We have education and degrees and certifications, but it's the walking through it. They're like, you walked through this and you got through it on the other side. How did you get to the other side? Because we're right now at the beginning and we don't even know where to start on this thing, And so I think there's a part of us that would say to people, you just got to be willing to take one more step, and don't even look at the journey ahead of you. Look at one more step, because this is not going to be easy work. Betrayal recovery is one of the hardest things. I don't wish it on anybody, but everybody in life goes through it in one way or another. My prayer is it's not a marital, sexual thing, right. But people get betrayed all the time, but how do we navigate and become more of a resilient person to say, how can I navigate through this? But it's opening yourself up to be open to say, hey, there's a lot of hurt here, and I'll tell you, from a guy's perspective, I work with a lot of men that you send me that come to me and they put a guard up and they say, I'm not hurt. I'm okay. Look at my success around me. And they put this shield up and they're not vulnerable enough to say, wait a second, there's a depth inside of me that's a void, that I need to access, because I can't even go into a relationship. I've been playing a part, this kind of character in my marriage without really finding out the true me. I don't even know myself. And that becomes a kind of like a midlife crisis for a lot of people, because they come to realize they don't even know who they are. But if they take one more step,
that's right.
they get to discover something that is something beautiful. That was something about my own life. I got to discover something that was new and actually inspiring about me. I'm not saying I'm inspiring.
You are.
But it was inspiring to me. I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that about me, which is a powerful one-step model, and I think that's important for people to hear. You don't have to have the journey planned out.
But that helps me.
Yes.
As partner, go, okay, like, you're learning something new about you, and we're working together to assimilate that into incorporate that into our new relationship, really.
Yeah.
And that feels like building trust, right?
That's right.
And then if I encompass that with accountability and help, as Kristin, you were saying, then that feels like a fertile ground for trust to be built.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just time.
Because I'd also say something that's so effective with the both of you from a therapist or intervention perspective is what is jarring but admirable at the same time with both of you is the honesty and vulnerability with which you share your story with everyone. So much of this trauma is all about lies, and as you said, kind of living this all of fake personality to this world, this inauthentic BS facade. And it really is exhausting, but most of us aren't in touch with how exhausting that process truly is until you see somebody speak like James. We think when we hear James talk about his story, we go, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying this out loud and in a public setting. Don't you know, you should be embarrassed. You should be ashamed that you did these things. But it's at the same time, like Brene Brown says, vulnerability is the last thing I ever want you to see in me, but it's the first thing we look for and admire in other people. Is you hear James share his story, and then Teri, obviously your story too, of hanging in there through this process, is I want to go to there. I want to be able to share this devastating, life-altering experience with this kind of nonchalantness that you can now reference it because you're so many years removed from it of yeah, that was gnarly. Listen to what I did, I took a nuclear bomb and blew my life up and destroyed my children and my wife, and we worked and we spent tons of money and time rebuilding it all. Crazy, right? But that is the inspiring and jarring and admirable part of that is, and again, that's why group work is so helpful too, because you want to hear these stories and you're I want to go to there. How do I get to there?
Kristin, you talk about group work. I remember when the week of us falling, my big fall, I was told by our therapist, hey, I needed to go, and they had a group that I needed to join. That was the scariest thing I've ever done. I thought, no problem. I'll talk to you one-on-one. I am not going to go and sit in a room, a bunch of guys that are beneath me. That's how I felt. Like, I'm not those guys. And so all of a sudden, I remember going. I should have.
Like your face was like white when you left. You were like sweating.
Gosh, I'm like,
have fun.
Oh my, yeah. No, you weren't saying have fun. You were like, I hate you.
No, I was like, I hate you, but have
fun. But I remember going, and I remember walking into this church, and there was a smoke, and no one was at this church. It was just these guys, and there was only 5 of them. And I walk in, and I was so scared. But once I stepped into that place, I thought, whew. I found somebody who actually knew me, that could actually connect with me, that actually could speak my language.
Yeah.
It was freeing. It was like, oh, wow. This is the one thing I've been afraid of, being seen as a fraud, or a fake. And all of a sudden, I'm actually seen with a vulnerable expression of who I was, but a full acceptance of who I was. Now, they didn't accept the behavior and say, hey, keep on doing what you're doing. They're like, no, you screwed up. Now let's figure out how to now get you back on your feet again, so that you can actually go and partner with your wife to actually start doing the work that you need to do. And that was powerful for me, and so for a lot of people who are just terrified of that, I understand, but I'll tell you, it is, once you get in, it's like, this is the greatest thing in the world. I'm still, some of my dearest friends are those guys in my group. I know I'm going to be talking to one of them tomorrow. And we do partnerships and what we're doing with marriage health. But I'll tell you, we were in a group together that we now have a lifelong relationship,
right.
Because we walk with that same kind of limp, or the same kind of scars together, which made us stronger and I think more impactful, but I think that is for people who are on the ones of the betrayer, understanding that to be able to bring healing and restoration to your relationship, you're going to have to take a step, and it's going to be out of your control. It's going to be one of those things where you think, I'm always in control. Well, not here, because this is what got you in the trouble in the first place. And you got to take that one, what about Bob? I love that old movie, right. But I'm going to take a baby step, and so what does it actually look like? Well, it means like, all right, accept that I got a problem here and I need help. Okay, and I can't do this alone. All right, and then I'm actually going to take a step to actually engage. I mean, those are some simple principles that you can apply to your own personal life to actually start going towards, because one, she deserved it. I know I deserved it for me first, because I had to do it for me. Because if she left and she was gone, I still had to do it for me. But then all of a sudden, she was a recipient of that baby step. And then it's a legacy now that our 3 daughters are receiving from it, and that our son-in-law and son-in-laws to be and grandbaby, they're the receiving end of that as well, and that we are able to take baby step 1. And that was huge. That was life altering, more so than the affair or the betrayal, than that is in itself, or the addiction, is that one step of like guts. Will I step forward to do what's right? So not a pat on my back, because I'll tell you right now, if I saw a back door, I was running there. And then when he offered me a back door, I never saw the back door. I just that's the only door I have.
Because I was standing there with a gun.
Well, she had a gun. Yeah.
Totally kidding.
It's so true. I mean, you and I always say, like, cheers to breaking cycles. Cheers to breaking cycles. It doesn't. One of my favorite sayings, I say it all the time, pain that is not transformed is instead transmitted. And so it is our job to always identify our pain, because we all have it. We're flawed human beings living in a broken world. But it is our job, what happened to us is not our fault. The way we've been betrayed or victimized, that is not our fault, but it becomes our responsibility to identify our pain so we can transform it, so we never transmit it to our children, to those around us. That's, like, to me, one of my lifelong goals.
Good.
I love it.
Well, honestly, that's like, and wrap, because that is like how beautiful a thought to end,
yes.
Our time together, Kristin, is to be able to say, hey, if you're watching this, if you're listening, you can.
That's right.
Right? You can walk in transformation so that you can, transmit good things, right? you can transmit transformed good things.
Yeah.
And that's the hope that we have. So
that's right.
Kristin, we can't thank you enough.
Kristin, where can people find your YouTube? What is it? Is it just Kristin Snowden?
Yep, just my website, Kristin Snowden. It's Kristin Snowden. And then, I have hundreds of videos that are free access. I have a book, online groups, because I'm a believer in them. So I always have online groups available. So.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, Kristin, we are so thankful for you and what you do. But it's also, we're like, fellow soldiers in that trench fighting forward, and sometimes picking people's weapons up and fighting for them sometimes, kind of making sure that we're pointing in the right direction. And so I'm just really grateful for you and what you do. But I'm telling you, we're changing one life at a time. And you are the model for that. So thank you. And don't give up. Keep on going.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Always a pleasure to chat with you guys. So good to see you both.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you've heard anything today that you have questions about, you want to dive in more, James and I just published a book and workbook and coming video series called The Resilient Marriage. Reach out to us at marriagehealth.org. We'll see you soon.